The world, as seen through the high-definition monitors of a live television broadcast, is a place of curated joy. It is a realm of flawless makeup, timed laughter, and stories that wrap up neatly within the allotted segment time. For over 2 decades, Kelly Ripa had been the undisputed queen of this realm, a woman whose effervescent energy and genuine warmth could, it seemed, bend the very nature of televised reality to her will. She was a professional in the truest sense, capable of finding a thread of authentic connection with everyone from A-list celebrities to nervous first-time guests, all under the unblinking gaze of the camera. But on this particular morning, the alchemy wasn't working. The studio lights, usually a source of energizing warmth, felt oppressive and clinical, like the lights of a surgical theater. The low hum of the audience, a sound that typically filled her with a performer's adrenaline, was a distant, dissonant buzz in her ears. She walked across the familiar, cable-strewn floor, a porcelain coffee cup, a personal favorite, not the network's generic branded mugs, clutched tightly in her hand. The steam rose in a fragile wisp, a ghost of normalcy. Her co-host, her partner in the carefully choreographed dance of morning television, was already at his mark, reviewing his notes. He was a steady presence, a rock, but Kelly's eyes, usually so bright and engaging, were scanning the periphery of the set with a strange, restless intensity. They flickered towards the dark screen of her phone, placed just out of shot on the small, faux living room table between their chairs. It had been 4 hours, 17 minutes. The message still hadn't come. A casual observer might have missed it, the slight tremor in her hand as she set the cup down, the fraction of a second too long that her smile lingered after a joke from a production assistant. But to those who knew her, who had worked alongside her for years, the dissonance was deafening. This was not the Kelly they knew. Something was fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. The storm had been brewing not for hours, but for weeks. It was a low-pressure system that had settled over their lives, a creeping fog of unspoken anxieties that had begun to permeate the very walls of their home. And it all crystallized around a promise, a vow made in the intimate, vulnerable darkness just before sleep. The house was quiet, the kind of deep silence only found in the late hours after the city had hushed and the children were long asleep. Their bedroom was a sanctuary, a world away from the bright lights and public scrutiny. Mark lay beside her, his breathing even but not yet the slow, measured rhythm of true sleep. Kelly was curled on her side, her back to him, but she was rigid, every muscle taut with a tension that sleep refused to claim. She felt his hand, warm and familiar, find her shoulder. His touch was always a grounding force, but tonight it felt like an anchor she was terrified of losing. "Kelly?" His voice was a soft murmur in the darkness. She didn't turn, afraid he would see the tears she was desperately holding back. "Mm-hmm." He shifted, his body spooning against her, his arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her close until his lips were near her ear. "I know we live busy lives, rushing from the show to the kids' events, to meetings, to everything. It's a whirlwind. We're ships passing in the night sometimes." Kelly placed her hand over his, lacing their fingers together. It was a gesture of unity, but her grip was tight, almost frantic. "But promise me one thing," he continued, his voice dropping even further, imbued with a gravity that made her heart clench. "No matter what happens, no matter what we go through, you'll never leave me. We'll get through it together, okay? Whatever it is, together." The words hung in the air thick and heavy. They were not the light romantic promises of their youth. These were words forged in a different fire, the fire of midlife, of shared history, of facing the slow, inexorable march of time. They felt less like a pledge and more like a plea. Kelly finally rolled over to face him. In the faint glow of the city lights filtering through the blinds, she could see the earnest intensity in his eyes. She forced a smile, the same brilliant megawatt smile millions saw every morning. But it was a facade, a beautiful piece of armor. "Mark," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "You know I can't go a day without you. You're my oxygen." It was the truth, but it was an incomplete truth. Behind that smile was a chasm of fear, an unknown darkness she had never been able to articulate, not to him, not to her closest friends, not even fully to herself. It was the fear of his absences becoming more than geographical, the fear of the light in his eyes dimming, the fear of a silence that was more than just not speaking. It was the primal terror of the other half of your soul becoming unreachable. He had kissed her forehead, a soft, sealing kiss, and settled back, seemingly comforted. "Together," he had whispered once more before his breathing evened out into sleep. Kelly had lain awake for hours watching the digital numbers on the clock march forward. The promise, instead of being a comfort, had become a cage. "Never leave me." The words echoed, morphing in the dark corners of her mind. Did he fear she would leave, or was it a preemptive strike against a departure of his own? The fear, that unknown darkness, had taken root, and in the sterile light of the studio morning, it was blooming into full-blown terror. The producer, a sharp, perceptive woman named Sarah, who had been with the show since its inception, approached Kelly just minutes before air. She placed a gentle hand on her arm, her voice low and concerned. "Kelly, you've been a little quiet today. Everything okay? You're not getting sick, are you?" Kelly turned, and the smile was instantly there. It was a marvel of muscle memory, a perfectly calibrated expression of reassurance and cheer. It reached her eyes, crinkling the corners, but it did not reach her soul. "Yes, everything's fine, Sarah," she said, her voice breezy and light. "Just a little tired. Didn't sleep great, you know how it is." But there was a tremor in her voice, a slight vibrato of strain that Sarah's trained ear detected. She gave a hesitant nod, her eyes lingering on Kelly's for a moment too long before she turned to address the crew. The machine of live television waited for no one, not even its queen. The show began. The signature music swelled, the audience erupted in applause, and the red light on the main camera glowed to life. It was a ritual as familiar as breathing. Kelly launched into her opening banter, her voice projecting the same energy and warmth it always did. She laughed at the right moments, she teased her co-host, she engaged with the audience. It was a masterclass in performance. But inside, she was fracturing. Each laugh felt like a shard of glass in her throat. Each smile was a physical effort that drained her. Her mind was not on the teleprompter or the guest segments. It was trapped in a loop, replaying the night before, the weight of the promise, the terrifying silence from Mark's phone. The fear was no longer a quiet whisper, it was a scream, deafening and desperate, drowning out the scripted dialogue and the audience's reactions. She felt the heat of the lights intensify, the air in the studio growing thick and difficult to breathe. A fine sheen of perspiration formed on her brow, quickly blotted away by a makeup artist during a commercial break who gave her a worried look. Kelly just shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She was drowning on dry land in front of 1 million people. The segment was a light one, a conversation with a dog trainer and his impeccably behaved golden retriever. The audience was oohing and awing, the dog was performing its tricks perfectly, and her co-host was asking engaging questions. It was TV gold. But for Kelly, it was all background noise. Her gaze drifted past the fluffy dog, past the beaming trainer, and landed on her silent phone. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, gripped her heart. What if something happened? What if the fear wasn't unfounded? What if the promise was his way of saying goodbye? The world seemed to slow down. The laughter from the audience became a distorted, echoing sound. The bright lights blurred into a single, blinding whiteness. And in that moment, the carefully constructed dam inside her broke. Suddenly, she fell silent. In the middle of her co-host's sentence, her smile vanished. Her eyes wide and unseeing closed for 2 long, agonizing seconds. A hush, confused at first, began to fall over the studio. Her co-host glanced at her, his cue card smile faltering. When her eyes opened, they were glistening with unshed tears. She looked not at her co-host, not at the guest, but directly into the camera, into the homes and hearts of millions. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice a soft, broken thing, so unlike her usual cadence. There are moments in our lives that change everything about us, that redefine who you are. My husband, Mark," she said, the name a prayer and a pain on her lips. "He made me a promise just last night, a promise that I still can't forget. He asked me to never leave me, to face everything together." She took a shaky breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop their violent trembling. The studio was